As well as watching this vodcast, you can watch Good Game on ABC2 every Monday night at 9 o'clock and ABC1 late on Friday nights after Triple J TV with the Doctor. Hello and welcome to Good Game.
The show for gamers, by gamers. I'm Barger.
And I'm Junglist.
This week we go headfirst into oncoming traffic with Burnout Paradise.
And we'll be immersing ourselves in the massive Lost Odyssey. It's the latest turn-based role-playing game from Final Fantasy creator Hironobu Sakaguchi. It's the game he said he always wanted to make. Plus, we'll be looking at this legendary developer's work in backwards compatible.
And Lux goes in search of compatibility herself. Online styles. Is it possible to fall in love while playing?
With a game? Hell yeah.
No, with a real-life person.
Ah.
Now, can you guess the name of the game for this week? It's one of the early works by Criterion Games, makers of Burnout. Now, Junglers, for the news this week, I've dug up something a little retro that some of you may recognize. Work experience noob, my threads!
Good game!
Comic book and MMO fans were on the receiving end of some bad news this week, with Microsoft Game Studios corporate vice president Shane Kim announcing that the anticipated Marvel Universe Online had been cancelled. The massively multiplayer online game was being developed by City of Heroes creators Cryptic Games, and would have been the first MMORPG to allow players to play alongside Marvel characters such as Spider-Man, Daredevil, the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, and many others. The reason behind the cancellation is clear, with Mr. Kim stating that the market domination of World of Warcraft was to blame. Electronic Arts are offering an unconditional refund for any disappointed customers who purchase their latest World War II shooter, Medal of Honor Heroes 2, for the Nintendo Wii. Despite advertising and packaging saying that the game has an online multiplayer mode supporting up to 32 players, the Australian version doesn't include any of these features, as many dedicated Medal of Honor fans found out upon the game's release a little over a week ago. The lack of online multiplayer is particularly disappointing, as Australia is the only major territory to not have access to the game's multiplayer features.
Good game!
Final Fantasy creator Hironobu Sakaguchi has teamed up with Microsoft to create the biggest game on the 360 yet. Sporting 4 DVDs of role-playing adventure and turn-based combat, the product of their forbidden love is Lost Odyssey. We spoke to Mr. Sakaguchi last year at E3 about the game's main character.
He lived for 1,000 years, but at the beginning of the game, he lost his memory. So he gradually, during the game, remembers his past. That means what he was considering very important in his life. As he remembers those things, he will emotionally grow during the game.
It is kind of a big deal, this guy moving over to Microsoft, isn't it? I mean, Microsoft have been trying to penetrate the Japanese market for years, unsuccessfully. Could this finally be the cause of Japan embracing a Western-made console?
Quite possibly. Final Fantasy fans will feel right at home with the combat structure. Even most of the spells are the same. All of the epic storyline, beautiful architecture, and sometimes touching cutscenes you'd expect are present.
Although now you've got the ability to combine spells later on to make super spells.
That's right, and your immortal character Kaim can learn these spells and abilities from items and mortals in your party. Now you'd think it'd be handy having the knowledge of an immortal, but this guy got gypped. He's got amnesia.
Have you seen any of this before, Kaim?
No. Nothing.
So you'll be battling trash mobs right alongside your inner demons as Kaim regains his memory as you progress through the game.
In combat, you have to pay attention to several things. For example, you don't want to shoot a fire spell at a fire enemy or you'll hit for nil damage. Formations let warriors block for spellcasters in the back, and some actions are quicker than others, so you'll have to get them in before they do.
There's also a new target ring system in place, which gets rid of some of the randomness of melee attacks. It's essentially the same minigame over and over, and if you get perfect timing, you get the effect of whatever magic ring you're wearing, whether it's fire damage or paralysis. Now, Badge, forgive me, but I automatically assumed that the turn-based combat was a step backwards. And I'm not a convert, but the bosses in this game forced me to admit that there's a strategy here that you can't find anywhere else.
Yes, well, every boss fight requires the accumulation of the knowledge you've learnt so far to beat them. It's also one of those games where you have to stock up on every single potion before you go out to battle. But there are other things besides the target system that are new here. Keim's dreams, for example.
Yes, as Keim recovers his memory, you unlock dreams. These are optional and totally unique to Lost Odyssey.
Funnily enough, these characters dream in text, not just any text either. Famous Japanese author text Kayoshi Shigematsu. And if you like your combat broken up by beautiful cutscenes, walking around magical cities, and eloquent short stories, then it delivers in spades. So much so, you start wondering if it's the short stories being broken up by the combat. The idea behind each story is very good, but the skillful writing is lost in translation, and they all represent a large time investment. I don't know, what did you think about the dream sequences, John?
I don't know, didn't watch them.
How come?
Dude, less talky, more fighty.
I think you've summed up there in 4 words what I've been trying to say the whole review. There are these long stretches without any combat, so why make them longer?
I got a better idea. If you want to read some good stories, why not go buy a book? But look, we're 35 hours into this thing and we're nowhere near finishing. So with a game this big, it's easy to nitpick.
You mean about how they can't get the facial shading right, but you can clearly make out the veins in the Queen's cleavage?
Or how Keim's armor has a belly button. Or how the country keeps on making the mistake of storing their prisoners right next to the Queen's bedchambers.
And it's annoying how the gameplay doesn't match the cutscenes. For an immortal, he's got a nasty habit of dying, and how could a skilled soldier not be able to dodge this?
Plus, I've got to say it. The hair. I mean, it's bad enough it ignores gravity and wind, but the guy must have permanent pendulum vision. He's lived for 1,000 years and he still can't find a hair gel to tame that thing. Cut it off.
But I think the main thing holding Lost Odyssey back is the travelling mode. I mean, it's fine when you're walking around town shopping for items, but they've tried to use it for stealth missions and other things, and it just doesn't work. The controls are bad, and there's no fun value whatsoever.
Well, I'm sure some gamers may like it, but I agree with you. You know, the traveling mode was just boring. Say what you want about the combat, whether it's 2 steps backwards, 1 step forward, whatever, but this was like a 500-meter dash backwards to 1995.
I think it comes down to knowing what you're getting. The cover of this game makes it look like an action-packed epic, but about 70% of the gameplay is walking around town, talking to people, reading short stories, and watching emotional cutscenes. I'm going to wrap this up with 7 out of 10 rubber chickens. Junglist?
Ultra-linear with a strong story. If you're into Final Fantasy, you'll be into this, and it's good enough to bring in some newcomers as well. I didn't get tired of the turn-based combat. I actually got a little bit addicted to it, and 4 DVDs of cutscenes is massive. I'm giving it 8 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Good game.
You know, finding friends is never an easy task, and it's not much different when you venture online.
And some find a little more than friendship, finding their life partners even. But it's not always happy endings. Take it away, Lux.
When you're in an online world with thousands of other players sharing victory and adventure, friendships will naturally occur. Sometimes they might even turn a little romantic. And let's face it, the quickest way to the heart is through the rib cage. Melanie Nugent is a PhD student in the Faculty of Health Sciences at the University of Sydney. She's been studying online self-disclosure and is testing how people divulge personal information.
My study is looking at why people will reveal more personal information to a stranger they meet online than a stranger they meet in the real world. Being anonymous helps the disclosure process and helps disinhibition because you don't feel like there's someone there judging you or watching you and that your physical appearances don't matter. When you're online, you reveal information like your name and where you live and just bits of your day, like I play netball with this team. Those are identifying information, but you feel that you are anonymous and that might facilitate the disclosure process.
It's been suggested that there are factors unique to massive multiplayer online role-playing games that encourage intense relationships, such as placing players in high-stress, life or death environments, which real life rarely offers. Research on MMO gaming shows that about 50% of female players and 22% of male players have developed romantic feelings for another player, and 29% of female players and 8% of male players have physically dated someone they met in an MMO.
So you guys met in an MMO?
Yep.
Yep, we played World of Warcraft together. We met while I was playing a hunter, and then I made another character, which was also a hunter.
Yeah. I was playing a paladin when we first met.
Then he came along and healed me up.
I'm just curious about whether you guys started to have feelings for each other before you actually met in real life.
He might have.
I would say yes.
Mm-hmm. I think he did have a bit of a crush on me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep.
But I tend to flirt with all the people online.
When enraged and in heat, a female troll can mate over 80 times in one night. Be you prepared?
I found there were quests that I couldn't complete, not being a high enough level. It was because he was level 70. He was able to fly down and pretty much do the quest for me, and I'd get the experience and the credit for doing it.
Do you guys feel that there's a stigma attached to going out with someone that you've met online?
A lot of my friends were, after she saw a picture of, like through the guild forums and stuff, they thought she was a bit of a riot. It was fine for us to meet.
I think, because I only told my parents via phone, so I couldn't see their reaction. But I think at first they're like, oh, okay, but they had to get over it.
True love. But remember, just like real life relationships, online relationships don't always end in blissful harmony.
There are people who are able to present themselves as someone of a completely different gender, different age, different profession online, and build strong networks, friendship networks. And I sort of question, well, why is it? How do you do that? Because it must be something really different to be able to think like someone of a different gender and of a different age. What is it that's so disarming about communicating on the internet? You can't sort of just sense, like you can in real life, that someone's lying. And that's why deception is easier online.
Remember the golden rules for meeting people online. Be careful about the information you give out, and never meet someone you've met online alone. Take someone with you, meet in a public place, and make sure you tell friends or family about your plans.
So what's your take on this? Have you ever met people online that you now consider your friends, just like your mates in real life? Have you ever gone to meet someone in real life that you first met on the interwebs?
Do you think it will become a more common way for people to hook up in the future? Jump on the forums and leave us your thoughts and experiences. But now, it's time to delve into the more serious side of gaming.
Good evening, I'm Gavin Hostman and you're watching A Cartridge Affair, your #1 news source for what's coming up, going down, left, right, BA, start, select in the wild world of video game celebrities. In our first story tonight, he works in our homes, but when our backs are turned, he robs us blind. Tonight, we're focusing on a certain dodgy plumber who has been caught red-handed stealing from his clientele. We were first tipped off about his practices when we had this security tape mailed to our offices. Here we see him stealing coins on this CCTV footage. The horrors of this do not end here. We go to see him brutalize a bystander in a scene so graphic, we can only show you in a recreation with professional actors. You may ask, what fuels this spree of theft and violence? We spoke to an eyewitness about what drives this monster.
What can I say? The guy's uncontrollable. I can't even tell you how many times he's tried to push me into lava.
Why do you think he would do such a thing?
I don't know, he's just a plumber. But I guess he's trying to live the high life. He's got this girlfriend who's like a royal, and I guess he thinks he just needs to keep up. He's like, if he's not out there racing his go-karts, he's playing tennis or soccer or something. And the parties? I mean, forget about it. Do you even know how much space travel costs? He's all over the galaxy.
When our team tried to contact the accused and after locating the correct castle, we were only given this statement: Mamma mia, no commenta. A truly horrifying story. Coming up next in a fashion exclusive special, we ask the question, Spartan or HEV, which is the armor for you?
Good game.
The Burnout series of racing games have always been about driving as fast as possible, pinballing your way up the track, crashing into everything that moves, and more recently, listening to 6 different language versions of Avril Lavigne's Girlfriend.
But Burnout Paradise on the PS3 and 360 does things a little differently, letting you free roam around a busy city, starting events when and where you choose, and doing collection missions such as smashing through billboards and chasing down other roaming cars.
There's normal races, stunt events where you choose where you want to crash and flip, marked man events where you're the only target, and the classic road rage.
Ready for some rough stuff? Hit that takedown target.
Crash events and Aftertouch have been replaced with Showtime, which you can activate at any time to cause mayhem. Unfortunately, it does pull you out of whatever race you're in, so it's really just for fun.
I gotta say, I missed steering my wrecked car in slow motion into oncoming traffic, but what I missed more was being able to turn off the takedown camera. In Burnout Paradise, you're forced to sit through every single crash you create, and while this is really cool at first, it gets annoying fast. It was also kind of cheeky how all the vans with advertising stuck out a little bit in black and white.
And there's different classes of vehicles now. There's aerodynamic stunt cars, well-built aggression cars, and speed vehicles, which feel like you're driving a super-fast eggshell with fancy taillights.
You know, Junk, as far as races go, I've always had a bit of a soft spot for Burnout. Even though many other races out there offered a much more real experience, Burnout was always about the speed and the hell-for-leather craziness of the races.
Yeah, I mean, even though there's no bodies flying out windows or ragdoll physics or anything like that, you gotta love the aggressiveness of the drivers in Burnout.
I was a bit nervous about this one, Jung. It sounded like it could have been another Test Drive Unlimited, which tried to do a similar free roam thing, but had a gimped checkpoint system that was just plain boring.
Agreed, this one is much better. In fact, there's no checkpoints at all. For a race event, they just give you a start and a finish, and it's up to you whether to plan your route out on the map or just follow the compass and listen to the turn indicators. I mean, how did you find this badge? I thought it worked.
After being used to just pinballing my way through a Burnout game, the whole free roam thing kind of annoyed me at first, but after a while you start to appreciate the freedom, and also there's no load times.
Yeah, it is more focused on navigating than drifting badge, but I didn't really mind that. Tell you what I did mind was that Crash FM DJ. I found myself wanting to finish a race just so he couldn't rattle off another sarcastic dig at me.
Another one bites the dust. DJ Atomica here on Crash FM as another wreck gets added to someone's mantelpiece.
I thought Paradise Island could have been a bit bigger and some weather effects would have been nice. Also, it was a little too convenient that no trains were running and there were ramps on every single street corner.
Crunch time, Badger. The crashes in this game look awesome. The way the music filters down and the camera focus pulls, mixed with the crumple and the shattered glass, it really gives the feel of a high-speed impact, especially from the first person.
I like the top-down view myself. The cars look awesome, the crumple damage looks awesome, and when cars race side by side, the sparks, I've never seen sparks so cool, Junglist. The addition of repair stations and boost stations adds a new dynamic to the race as well.
Even though Burnout fans might not take to this free roam pinball hybrid straight away, once you get into Burnout Paradise, it's great fun. The world is completely devoid of human life, but there is substance here. I'm giving it 8 out of 10 burninating chickens.
There's stacks of cars to collect, some old favourites as well as some new ones. I would have liked a new soundtrack though, as opposed to a rehash of old Burnout games, and this is another racing game with no split screen. Thankfully, you can go online with it. I'm giving it 9 out of 10. This week, we've immersed ourselves in Lost Odyssey, the latest game from Hironobu Sakaguchi. In a career that spanned a quarter of a century and well over 40 games, Mr. Sakaguchi has become one of the most important minds in game development. His role as the creator of the Final Fantasy series has propelled him to the status of game design legend. But there's more to Hironobu Sakaguchi than just chocobos and spoonie bards. In 1983, at the age of 21, Hironobu dropped out of university to co-found a new game development company by the name of Squaresoft. His first few games covered a variety of genres and borrowed ideas liberally from other game designers, particularly Sega's Yu Suzuki, whose games Space Harrier and Outrun would inspire Sakaguchi's 3D World Runner and Rad Racer for the Nintendo Entertainment System. But none of these games achieved much success, and in later years, Sakaguchi would admit that his early projects never met his own expectations. After years of disappointment, he desperately needed a hit. As legend has it, by the end of 1987, Squaresoft only had enough capital to produce one more game, and if that game wasn't a success, then it would probably have been their last. That game was called Final Fantasy. Conceived, designed and directed by Hironobu Sakaguchi, Final Fantasy combined exploration, role-playing and turn-based combat with a story that put you in control of 4 warriors on a quest to, you guessed it, rescue a kidnapped princess. It was an instant hit in Japan, selling more than 3 million copies, simultaneously saving Squaresoft from ruin and satisfying Sakaguchi's own creativity. Sakaguchi would direct 4 more Final Fantasy games, although he always made sure that it reinvented itself with each sequel. Every game had an entirely new world and characters, and while the core gameplay remained essentially the same, each sequel had its own unique features. But the best was yet to come. In 1991, Sakaguchi was promoted to Vice President of Squaresoft, and after finishing the 5th game in the series, he stepped away from directing to focus on producing. As a producer, he would help to create many of the games that would define Squaresoft, including cult favourite Chrono Trigger, Nintendo mascot mashup Super Mario RPG, the strategy classic Final Fantasy Tactics, and the survival horror RPG Parasite Eve. He would also make 4 more Final Fantasy games, including the masterpiece Final Fantasy VII. Taking the series away from its sword and sorcery roots, Final Fantasy VII had a more steampunk atmosphere, with crude technology mixing seamlessly with magic and monsters. With a new skill system that allowed for more customizable characters and a complex storyline, Final Fantasy VII became an instant classic and had more than a few fanboys tearing up over this unforgettable moment. By the end of 1997, Final Fantasy's popularity had reached its peak, and riding on that success, Squaresoft invested heavily in a new project, a Final Fantasy movie, with Hironobu Sakaguchi as its director.
I'm standing, waiting for something. If they knew about these dreams, they'd shut me down.
Taking 4 years to produce and costing more than $150 million, Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within was a visually stunning computer-generated animated film. While it was generally received well by critics, this didn't translate into success. Box office receipts were dismal, and The Spirits Within became one of the biggest flops in cinematic history.
I'm not sure.
Both Squaresoft and Sakaguchi took the film's failure badly. Square would go on to merge with rival publisher Enix in 2003, while Sakaguchi would take a voluntary demotion, seeing out the rest of his time at the company in the lesser role of executive producer on 3 more Final Fantasy titles. In late 2003, after the completion of Final Fantasy XI, Sakaguchi resigned from Square Enix, ending his 20-year career at the company to form his own game studio, Mistwalker. With backing from Microsoft Game Studios, Mistwalker released Blue Dragon, a role-playing game for the Xbox 360, the first game to be both created and produced by Hironobu Sakaguchi in almost 7 years. And with Lost Odyssey already a hit in Japan, he's once again proven that he hasn't run out of ideas for the role-playing genre. Hironobu Sakaguchi, Good Game salutes you.
Good game.
Forget Blackbeard, forget Feathersword, forget Captain Jack Sparrow. There's a new kid on the block with ambitions to become the #1 pirate in the world. Meet Zack, the puzzle-solving pirate on a new quest to find the lost treasures of Captain Barbaros. And with the help of his golden flying monkey, Wiki, there's not much this combo can't handle.
Hang on, did you say a flying golden monkey?
Not much makes sense in this game, Jung, which I guess is why it succeeds as a puzzle game. Everything is new. When Zack rings Wiki after he changes into magical bell form, all nearby enemies turn into useful tools.
Hang on, did you say the monkey changes into a bell?
You can't fool me, Jung. I heard puzzle-solving noises coming from your room late last night.
Alright, you got me, and what you say is true. Enemies become useful to you after you ring the bell, or sometimes more useful in their normal form. It's up to you to manipulate them all to get through linear levels and get to the treasure at the end.
Yeah, it is quite linear as well. There's usually only one way to solve every stage. A steady difficulty curve will keep you going through jungle ruins, icy caverns, red-hot volcanoes, and beyond.
You'll need to use the Wiimote in different ways for different objects, but this didn't really add to the gameplay much. Much better were the ways that the levels were laid out and the thought that went into each puzzle. Underneath that cutesy exterior is some fiendish gameplay.
Yeah, it may look like a kid's game, but it's far from easy. You can even work yourself into a situation where you can't solve the puzzle anymore, so it's a good thing you can ask for help, but it'll cost you.
What I like about Zack and Wiki is its originality. You know, the puzzles are new, the game and the controls are new, and you have to think in a new way to win. It kind of reminds me of like a cartoony Myst.
Yeah, it's definitely a slow-paced game, so action fans may find it a little boring.
But the game is enjoyable to kids and adults, so it seems to me like a really good game to play with the family. The small levels mean that people in the room can see everything and shout out ideas. Additional Wiimotes can draw stuff on the screen, so it's actually a really good game for brainstorming.
And while you're talking about small levels, the levels are quite small, but there's a lot to do in them which make them feel bigger, and this is clever level design. Another thing I liked was the scoring method. Basically, if you take the time to work out a puzzle and solve it rather than bashing your head against it, you'll be rewarded with lots of extras. I can see playing through this game maybe a second time, Jung, but that would probably be it.
The 40 hours of gameplay stated on the box is very much dependent on the individual gamer. People will go through it at different speeds, but I can't imagine people who are into puzzles not enjoying this game, so I'm giving it 8.5 out of 10 flying golden chickens.
Even for a puzzler, it's slow-paced, and I think people who are left-handed may not like that everything in the game is designed for right-handers. However, in a world of resurrected franchises and trilogies, you've got to give it cred for originality. I'm giving it 8 out of 10.
Good game.
So gamers, did you guess the game for this week?
It was Trickstar, one of the first ever games from Burnout creators, Criterion Games.
Released in 1999 for PC and the Sega Dreamcast, Trickstar was a futuristic hoverboard racing game, and it really wasn't that good.
Yeah, it's a good thing they struck gold with the Burnout series because Trickstar really didn't do them any favors.
Well, that's the show for this week.
Next time we'll be blowing our download limit as we check out all the best downloadable games across all major platforms.
We'll be meeting the brain behind the new massively multiplayer online game, Pirates of the Burning Sea.
And we go inside the company that makes the game the armed forces use to train their personnel.
We'll create Baghdad virtually, and then they'll go and do their mission rehearsal within the game before they actually deploy in theatre.
It's great to see the response so far to the announcement about our project,
where we'll be working with you, the Australian Film Commission, and a professional developer to create our very own game.
You can already contribute ideas on the forums, and we'll be bringing you more information over the next few weeks.
Don't forget, we're as keen as ever to get your feedback and thoughts about the show, so hit up those forums.
Until next week, gamers, Barjo out.
Junglist out.